Hello, everybody. My name is Corey Rosen, and you're listening to the Story Podcast. Today, I have on a super awesome returning guest, Mr. Joe Cigan. You know, it's about 2 years to the day since I've had you on the show.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me, Corey.
Yeah, man. I'm so excited. And also, you were episode 39, and now you're episode 244. Almost exactly
Wow,
200 episodes. Yeah.
That's cool. Well,
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so, if you don't know who Joe Cigan is, you ought to. Lancaster's Joe Cigan. You're also you're a environmental lawyer. You're a guitarist. You're a singer-songwriter, and you're about to be releasing your new song "Too Little, Too Late" on Friday, July 19th. That's 2 weeks away.
That's right.
And this is the 5th song that you have co-wrote with your longtime producer, Bret Alexander of the Badlees, and Jon Ventre of the Clarence Spady Band plays bass on the track. And you've got a bunch of other like well-known, highly talented people on that track too.
Yeah, I'm very lucky in working with Bret. He has a great stable of musicians. So when we first started working together, I get very excited and I have these grandiose thoughts of like bringing in lots of people, and I want particular people for particular things. And the great thing I enjoy about working with Bret, he is a good a knack of keeping me in check, because he said, Joe, well, we don't need to make that complicated. Me and you, we could play everything and bring in anyone, we could bring in anyone we want just for particular tasks. And, I think that's worked for us because I think we're more productive that way. And it's allowed for a greater amount of control, and we're getting to business faster.
Right.
It's not a lot of planning. It's been, some of the, at least one of the songs that we recorded recently, we didn't decide we were going to use a drummer until the day of the session, and pulled someone in at the last minute. And actually, it was a great session. It worked out very well.
So it's been 2 years. What have you been up to since then?
Well, I'm still performing solo around the Lancaster area in central Pennsylvania. I still get back to northeastern Pennsylvania to play with my band from back home, the Benders, with Tom Martin and Marty Straub. And I've been continuing to work with Dan Jamison, who's a very dear friend of mine, incredibly talented musician, sound engineer, guitar repair, electronics. I mean, his company's doing some fantastic work now. He's been, reconditioning a lot of speakers and whatnot and putting them up for resale, and doing a lot of specialized work and wiring guitars. I know recently he just did a Bob Weir style setup on someone's Yamaha guitar. And Dan is being a Grateful Dead tribute artist, where his two principal bands, Midnight Moonlight, which is a Jerry Garcia tribute band, and High Times, which is more of a Grateful Dead tribute band, we started doing an acoustic duo focusing on Grateful Dead material and the covers that Grateful Dead have done. And also, too, I was very lucky that Dan invited me to join his High Times band. They were booked earlier this year in Mickey's Black Box. I think it was back in March. For a Watkins Glen style tribute, where there were going to be 3 tribute acts sort of replicating the vibe of the Watkins Glen Festival. So there was the High Times band covering the Grateful Dead material. Cordy Byron covered the band material, and there was also an Allman Brothers band. And that worked out very well. We have a wonderful recording of that show. And now I'm a permanent member of the High Times band. We have a number of gigs coming up throughout the year. And later on this month, we are playing the Longs Park Summer Concert Series on Sunday evening, Sunday, July 28th, again with the 2 other bands for a little bit of a Watkins Glen tribute. So, and we're going to be mixing the setup. We're not going to be playing the same set that we did back in March, just to keep it interesting for the folks that came out the first time.
Well, there you go. And we'll get into all of those dates and stuff later as well, because you got a lot of other stuff coming up, including the new song, July 19th. And we'll definitely get into that a little bit later. But I want to get into some of the stuff that we got into last time. But more importantly, what do you think, in your opinion, has been the biggest growth since you last came on the show musically?
Me as a musician?
Yeah.
Well, studying the Bob Weir guitar parts for the High Times Band has definitely improved me as a musician. Not only taking the time to work out the parts by ear, but Bob Weir is a very eccentric and different type of musician. His voicings are very odd. His rhythms are very odd. It's been a challenge to me to get those under my fingers. And, I always like to play something enough so I don't have to consciously think about it, that it's second nature. I think that helps evoke emotion from the sound, that it's not labored, that it's fun, the performer is having fun doing it, and people could relate to that. And I think that has provided a lot of growth in my playing. And also, too, playing with Dan, being such an incredible improviser, he definitely pushes me hard.
Right.
And even with the High Times Band, there are certain songs that I've expressed concern that vocally they're a bit out of my range. And he's encouraged me, and I think I just was short-selling myself, that some of those songs that I didn't think I was capable of, ultimately I really enjoy, and I think it sort of expanded my range and confidence in that regard. So,
and how about yourself as a singer-songwriter?
Well, as a singer-songwriter, since we last spoke, at that time I had recently released the first song that I collaborated with Bret Alexander on, and since that time we've been writing together and recording the music that we've been writing. It's been a lot of fun. So we'd typically get together for a writing session, work out a song, cut a quick demo, and then at a future date sort of set up a session to record the song. And for the most part, that's what's happened. We have a songwriting session, we have a recording session, and then we move on to the next project. And I've been very happy with the songs that we've been writing. They've been different, and have pushed me in some different directions, not only in dealing with themes and styles that I'm not familiar with, but having me revisit themes and styles from when I was a teenager, and the type of music that I played as a teenager, which has been sort of fascinating. But generally, it's like a writing session and a recording session. The one thing about this new song that I'm releasing, Too Little Too Late, we actually wrote it over 2 sessions. I was in northeastern Pennsylvania around the Easter holiday to visit my folks, and I had a session set up with Bret, and we got together and we worked out a chord progression, and we worked out a verse, but it wasn't really flowing. And instead of forcing it, we called it a day. And after Easter Sunday, I was thinking about delaying my return to Lancaster to see if he had some time Monday morning for another writing session to see if we could finish it off. And it was interesting because on Easter Sunday I had a little alone time, and I worked out a couple more verses. And when we got together, we ultimately decided that those were not good. They weren't really what we were looking for, but we ended up knocking the song out. So like we wrote this most recent song in April of 2023, and finally recorded it this past May.
Nice. That's awesome, man. Is that something you think you're wanting to continue and stuff, like go on like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'd like to release as much original music as I can, but I have my day gig, which is fairly demanding. I have a couple band projects now, and getting involved in the High Times Band, it's taken a lot of time to come up to speed on that material, because it just wasn't a matter of learning the chord progressions and familiarizing myself with the songs. Like one of the songs that I learned, Here Comes Sunshine, from the Grateful Dead's Wake of the Flood album in 1973, the jam part, there are 3 to 4 different sequences, depending on the year it was performed, where Bob Weir has these different rhythmic themes. So I had to work out those themes just for a jam, but also to familiarize myself with them to the degree where they're not like played methodically. They're sympathetically presented in relation to the other music. So I mean, I found that to be quite a challenge, as opposed to like a fill-in gig where you pick up a bunch of songs and you get the lead sheets. It's nothing like that.
Right.
You really have to really delve into the music and spend a lot of time with it. Fortunately, I am a Grateful Dead fan. I used to follow the band in my youth, and I've seen a lot of Grateful Dead concerts, and I played in a Grateful Dead tribute band in the 80s and early 90s. So it's odd to be revisiting that part of my musical career, because, you know, after I played in a Grateful Dead band in college, but when I went to law school in New Orleans, I was really infatuated with New Orleans music and the uptown music scene and the funk scene and the Meters and George Porter Jr. and Smilin' Myron and all those bands that were galactic, that were very popular at the time. And, you know, while I still did love Grateful Dead music, I just haven't been interested in focusing on it exclusively.
Also, if you want to hear more of Joe's origin story, please be sure to go check out episode 39 of the Story Podcast, where we start from your childhood and get to here. Do you mind if we talk about the environmental lawyer gig?
No, not at all.
All right. Tell me, give me the overview of what you do and how that applies to law.
Okay. Well, I specialized in environmental law when I went to law school. It was the field I wanted to pursue. And it is a fairly sophisticated field comparatively, because there's a lot of science involved.
Yes.
Because you're dealing with emissions to, you know, discharges to surface waters, discharges to the air. There's often a lot of science involved. And if you are litigating a matter, you're going to need to have experts, and you're going to need to have some understanding of what your expert's going to say and how they develop an opinion. So, you know, I've been practicing law for 30 years now, and I've been very lucky to do it in the field that I targeted as an environmental attorney. And I've been with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection for my entire career. I spent 23 years in our Northeast Regional Office in Wilkes-Barre. I was raised in that area, and that was, it meant a lot to me working on environmental issues in the area that I loved, in the area that I was raised.
In the coal country.
In the coal country, yes, exactly. When I moved to Lancaster, I did so because I took a job in our central office and became the director of the Office of Chief Counsel's General Law Division. And I supervise and manage the lawyers that assist the agency with their transactional work. So the lawyers that I supervise are not environmental lawyers. They're procurement lawyers. They're ethics lawyers, bankruptcy, bonding, intellectual property, right to know. So it's sort of the business behind the business. Right. And the thing that's very enjoyable about it is that we need to work very closely with the attorneys that counsel the programs that as directed by the legislature to help them, you know, meet those goals. So since we last spoke, I've been promoted. I'm a deputy chief counsel with DEP now. So in addition to being the director of the general law division, and my staff expanded just because we were doing a lot of additional procurements associated with federal monies that were available on the Inflation Reduction Act, and whatnot. And also the director of our Bureau of Investigations reports to me. And those are the lawyers, investigators that assist us in developing cases, assist us in executing search warrants, assist us in coordinating matters that we might refer to the Office of Attorney General for criminal enforcement, because the Department of Environmental Protection, we're the civil agency. We issue permits. If anyone is involved in a violation of that permit, it would be subject to civil penalties. But sometimes we run across circumstances where someone may present inaccurate information in a monitoring report, or alter sampling analysis, or try to destroy evidence. In that case, those are matters most appropriately handled by the Office of Attorney General, and we will forward those along. So I'm very lucky. I have an incredibly talented staff, and it's been great working with the program staff in DEP. They try very hard to implement the programs in the most cost-effective manner, and getting the most benefit to the citizens of the Commonwealth. So that it's been a lot of fun being a public servant in that regard.
What do you think is the most interesting case that has come to you in that field?
After 30 years, it would be that's a tall order. I'd say probably the most challenging and interesting cases. Well, in the mid-2000s, under the Bush administration, there were amendments made to the Natural Gas Act to try to expedite the regulatory review process. Many of the programs that we implement are delegated by the federal government. Mm-hmm. And one of our roles, if there is an activity that's regulated under federal law that impacts water, is to assess whether the proposed activities will violate water quality standards. And typically when we do that, that would be a state action that would be challenged before the Pennsylvania Environmental Hearing Board. The mid-2000s amendments to the Natural Gas Act said for gas development related activities, any challenge to a state-issued water quality certification needs to be reviewed before the Third Circuit Court of Appeals.
Okay, so federally.
Federally, before, and the Third Circuit, that's a fairly high court.
Yes, yeah.
And when we were defending those actions before the Pennsylvania Environmental Hearing Board, the board would take testimony, they'd take witnesses, where the federal review is done under a record review, where we would have to certify everything's on paper and would have to sort of document each portion of the decision. So there were a lot of growing pains within the agency to make sure that we document our actions in a manner that we could successfully defend them. And also, too, there were a lot of challenges as to whether the jurisdiction in the federal courts was original, was it parallel with state courts, and also these were big projects, and they were infrastructure projects. Mm-hmm. They involved, providing services to folks. There was a lot of concern as to whether they're going to come to fruition. So I think I enjoyed those cases most of all because I got to argue them before the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and they dealt with a number of issues of first impression where there was no precedent, where we were developing our arguments and presenting them to the court.
That's
and
cool.
The interesting thing, there were some different rulings among the various states that needed to be reconciled, which was also fascinating. They didn't necessarily line up between circuits. So that was a lot of fun and very challenging. I don't litigate as much as I used to in my former capacity now that I'm supervising and running an office. But I still get out there.
It's pretty cool.
A decent amount.
Because the circuits are that's one step below Supreme Court.
Well, yes. I mean, there's the D.C. Circuit, which is often referred to as the Little Supreme Court, and I have appeared before the D.C. Circuit before in a matter that was up in Lackawanna County. But yeah, it was very exciting to be able to argue at that level as a state attorney.
And successfully?
Oh yeah.
There you
go. I won the cases. Yeah, I was very happy with the results, and as was my client. Well, I did get promoted. So
well, you are. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, Joe is promoted. So there you go. Yeah, it's always interesting to me because this area has a lot of history, talking like environmentally, right? Because there's a lot of coal. There's a lot of industry here in the area, specifically coal. and there's correct me if I'm wrong, but there's currently burning coal in it's like underground. It's currently burning on fire.
There are mine fires. I mean, one of my office, we handle the procurement of goods and services on behalf of the agency, and we also assist with the processing of grant agreements.
Okay.
And fortunately, the federal government has been able to provide us money that we've been able to use to contract with private contractors to extinguish mine fires.
Okay.
And it's fantastic to see this land sort of put back into a positive use, and also limiting the impacts associated with mine fires, you know, to the extent they affect people's homes or affect businesses or affect highways and whatnot. So, you know, when I was a little hesitant when I pursued my current capacity, because when I was in the regions as a litigator, I felt that my work had a lot of impact on the community. But given the number of procurements and grant programs administered by the agency, it is truly wondrous to see all the good work that the agency does.
That's awesome, man. Is that you think you're going to continue that the rest of your days?
Practicing law?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I hope so. I really enjoy my work, and I really enjoy the people I work with.
Well, I know you're doing valuable work, so I appreciate you and everything you do.
Thank you, Corey.
Yeah, man. Let's get into some of your music, shall
Sure.
we? So, first up, we have Fall Into Me, which is a new direction for you.
Yeah, this was my most recently released single. It came out last June, and this is one that I wrote with Bret. And, you know, typically our writing sessions, you know, I've been very interested in the process. And are you familiar with Jeff Tweedy of Wilco?
No, I'm not.
Well, he's written a series of books where he's been very sort of honest about his process in creating and how he writes songs. And a lot of what he talked about sort of resonates with me. So typically, you know, I try to be open to moments of inspiration. And I try to keep a notebook with me to jot down any phrases or jot down a feeling for which,
now.
yeah, and I have a notebook right now, that, you know, I would like to develop into a song. Or there may be a chord progression, and I'll make a quick video on my phone, or a melody, and I basically consider that my pile. And I keep a file on my phone that when I'm feeling inspired, I will go through various ideas and see which ones resonate. And one thing that I found, that if I record something and it sits around for a year and I revisit it a couple times, that gives me a degree of confidence that it's a good idea, that it still appeals to me.
Right.
And if I'm in a different spot, approaching it from a different perspective. So generally when I approach Bret for a writing session, I'll take a handful of these ideas, maybe like 3 or 4 of them. And I'll come into the session and I'll present them to him, and I'll see what resonates with him. Like, which does he feel excited about and wants to work on? Because really, I mean, when you're trying to create music, I think, you know, being vested in the process and being excited about it results in a better product. So we'd take an idea like that and, you know, kick it around and like run through it and try different progressions, different rhythms. And develop it, and that's what I did when it came to Fall Into Me. There was a sort of a rhythm that sort of bum ba-dum ba-bum ba-dum ba-dum ba-dum. It was sort of sing-songy, reminded me of waves, of a boat on water, and we just started developing that, and oddly enough, it turned into a bit of a love song, which I've never really written anything like that before, but it felt genuine. It felt good. I'm very proud of the song, just because it's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, but I think it has a great progression, a great melody, great lyrics, and I think the production came together well. So, you know, it was a rewarding experience.
Well, let's take a listen to Fall Into Me by Joe Cigan.
find, and you'll find love is kind. Nothing else matters at all, so fall into me, my dear. Oh yes, fall into me. There's nothing else matters as long as we're here. Too long I felt on a shelf, waiting for a friend to help, and I find love is kind. Nothing else matters at all, so fall into me, my dear. Oh yes, fall into me. There's nothing else matters as long as we're here. The world will tear you down till forget it. There's nothing you can do. But love will lift you up if you let it. All you gotta do. Nothing else matters at all, so fall into me, my dear. Oh yes, fall into me, my dear. Yeah, fall into me, my dear. Oh my dear, fall into me. There's nothing else matters as long as we're here. We're here.
All right, so let's talk about the production of that. You mentioned that for the solo, you did some really cool stuff, and it took a while to get together. Tell me about that.
Well, generally we will record a song like this in a couple hours, and typically how it goes is Bret and I will play everything, and Bret will book a drummer for the session. Fortunately, AJ Jump was available to play on the song, and AJ's an incredibly talented musician, plays with a lot of different folks, and he's the musical director up at the FM Kirby Center in Wilkes-Barre, and he's been working with Bret for a very long time. And Bret played bass on the track. So it came together pretty quickly, pretty holistically. I mean, we typically will not use a click track to try to get a good vibe, and we'll try to lay the drums down live with a guitar or an instrument, so there's some interplay that we could build off on, so it does feel natural. And we ran the guitar solo a couple times, and what seemed to make sense to me was a solo that was melodic, mirrored the melody, was not necessarily, there wasn't a lot of heavy improvisation, but I do think I came up with the part during the session, if I'm remembering correctly, or immediately preceding the session. But we recorded it with an acoustic guitar and an electric guitar, and after we laid it down, Bret said, hey, how about we play these two at the same time? And it came out with a really cool effect, and that's one of the things I enjoy working with Bret in the studio, is because we generally don't try to impose a goal when we're recording. We sort of react to the moment. we sort of react to what we're hearing, and
you
often
service a song.
well, and spitballing ideas at the time. Some of the best ideas were sort of in the moment saying, "Hey, why don't we try this?"
Right.
And they ended up sticking very well. So that one was it was a great session. It was pretty effortless. It came together really, really quickly, and it was only the three of us. And generally, most of the songs I've been writing with Bret, it's been us playing on them, and we just book a drummer to lay down a drum track. With the most recent track, I asked Jon Ventre of the Clarence Spady Band, Too Little Too Late, to join us on track, because it was a funky song, and I thought Jon would serve the song really well. I had Jon in once before. He played on my EP Flair, upright bass. It was an all acoustic album, all live, no overdubs, all originals. So it was a real delight to work with Jon again.
That's awesome. So we have another one, Hot and Cold, not the Katy Perry song.
That's right. Now, Hot and Cold, this was a fun one to write, and it's not necessarily autobiographical situationally, but I was trying to convey a feeling of frustration, where somebody's words weren't necessarily matching up with their actions in a romantic relationship. And it was a fun session. I really enjoyed the demo, and where we thought the song was going when we wrote it, it sort of felt like a folky tune, and it sort of felt like just an acoustic guitar, and Bret would play a little mandolin, and would knock it out, and we were definitely going that way, and I was preparing for that. The morning of the session, I was laying in bed, and I woke up thinking about the song, and I just heard the song with like Neil Young's Crazy Horse playing it, with the sort of very simple, straightforward chords, very loud, very big, very sparse. And I thought, wow, this would be great to present it in this fashion. And I messaged Bret. It was like 7:30 a.m. to say, on a Monday, to say, hey, do you think it's possible we could get a drummer for the session? I think I think this would be good as a more a rock format. And fortunately, he was able to get Ron Samasic from the Badlees. And Ronnie's a great friend. I used to gig with him with Sean Z, who's a wonderful performer, great music. I really recommend you check out Sean Z's albums. As an Americana writer, he just clever lyrics, great grooves, very much, I mean, it's not a fair comparison, but he reminds me of Steve Earle, where like the music is culturally relevant and very accessible and very catchy. But, there were a couple gigs I did with Sean, with Ronnie on drums, so it was great. And Ronnie played on my EP too, which was a lot. No, I'm sorry, Ronnie didn't play on my EP. I was confusing that for a second. That was AJ. So we got Ronnie in for the session, and it came together really quick. I mean, Ronnie was perfect on the track. I mean, his drums, I think, really inspired it. And the guitar solo, for me, was one of the most satisfying in-studio experiences, because it was truly an improvisation.
Oh, wow.
I did not prepare a solo in advance, and we did one take just to sort of set the levels right, get the tone right. And the second take, it was perfect. We only did 2 takes of that solo, and the second take was the one. And one of the interesting things is when I concluded the solo, the guitar started feeding back, and I held it. I held the feedback, and the feedback extends through the end of the solo. And like, I remember in the studio, Bret turning around, just like watching me, like he did not expect it, but he let it stay on the track and recording. It was like, that was great. And it was one of these just sort of serendipitous, it seems planned.
Right.
It seems like, because it has such a great effect, but it was totally spontaneous. I couldn't replicate it in a million years if I tried to do it, but it just served the moment so well. So I'm very proud of that. And when I was younger, I was playing in bands in high school, and when I first my first band in college at Lafayette was an alternate band, and we played a lot of Cure and a lot of Replacements and whatnot, I'm a big fan of that music, but that really wasn't where my heart was at the time. I was very much interested in Grateful Dead music and studying it intently. So I ultimately was joined a Grateful Dead cover band after that. But this song, Hot and Cold, reminded me of that band from my freshman year in college, where it was more in your face, upfront, raw. So it was nice to sort of revisit that. And like the feedback I received, most folks are like, wow, this is a real departure for you. And I'm like, well, little do you know, it's sort of getting back to my roots.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, let's take a listen to Hot and Cold by Joe Cigan.
Changed in a moment. Didn't seem to care. Last time was so easy. Won't you even name it? Is it really even there? Say it if it matters. Time to clear the air. Running hot and cold. Never did I know what the story holds. If you wanna stay with me, oh, running hot and cold. Never do I know, never did I see. Why'd I even bother? You never even tried. I did not forsake you. Why'd you say goodbye? Running hot and cold. Never did I know what the story holds. If you wanna stay with me, oh, running hot and cold. Never do I know, never did I see. Can't judge a book by its cover. Seemed like a friend, felt like a lover. But some days I just don't know. Running hot and cold. Never did I know what this story holds. If you wanna stay with me, oh, running hot and cold. Never do I know, never did I see. Oh, running hot and cold. Never do I know, never did I see.
And that was Hot and Cold by Joe Cigan with Bret Alexander on the harmonies there, too.
Yeah, and Bret played bass also on that track, and it was Ron Samasik from the Badlees on drums.
And so you got some upcoming stuff that you would like to talk about with Dan and Dogfish Head and a bunch of other stuff.
Well, Dan and I have been friends for quite some time, and I really respect him as a musician. I think he's a
cool.
fantastic player, very diverse, incredible skill, incredible ear, very sympathetic, great to play with. He reacts you could turn on a dime. And we've been gigging together the past couple years, and we started to sort of formalize it more. We've been gigging under the name Danjo. So you get what is advertised, Dan and Joe.
Right.
And, and people sort of snicker at it, but, I think it's a great name.
I think it's great.
It's like Fleetwood Mac, McFleetwood, John McVie. I mean, this is not the first time people have sort of jammed two names together and said this is what it is. But Danjo has sort of been an umbrella project for us, where we explore the music that we love. We've also been playing with different folks. We've been playing with Brad, who's Dan's drummer in the High Times and Midnight Moonlight band. And we've also been playing with Dodd, who runs sound down at McCleary's. And Dan was booked to play the first Thursdays of the month at McCleary's, and it sort of morphed into myself and Dodd playing with him. And half the night I play bass, and Dan plays guitar, and the other half Dan plays bass, and I play guitar, and that's been a lot of fun, sort of expanding our horizons. And Dodd is such an incredible musician with just extremely diverse background, and he masters a number of different styles very well. Not only is he a quick study, if you ever asked him to learn a tune, he'll come in and be able to play it perfectly. But I found out he had an interest in reggae and has played in reggae bands. So like when we play reggae songs together, like I do Elvis Costello, Watching the Detectives, just to have someone who's not like imitating, who's actually like laying it down, is really thrilling. And also with Dan, we've been doing, I forget the name of the song. I'm sorry, I forget, but it's a really fun reggae tune. So the Danjo project has been great, and one of the things that we started doing were Grateful Dead themed sets with Danjo, and we started doing that at Tellus, and that's Tellus 360 in Lancaster, and that has been a lot of fun. We have pulled Deadheads out from different friend groups and people that we've met. Who've been very supportive, have been repeat customers. Some of the folks that saw us out at Mickey's Black Box have now been following Danjo, which has been very gratifying. And it's also been fun to sort of, we're in the High Times band. Dan is very much doing the Jerry Garcia's role, and I'm doing the Bob Weir role. Here we're blurring the lines a little bit more, and also we're taking some of these songs and providing our own interpretations, and other times we're playing them very accurately. So that's been a heck of a lot of fun. And Danjo, this month we're going to be playing at let me make sure I get this right. We have one gig down in Rehoboth Beach on the 27th at Dogfish Head Brewing.
That's my original neck of the woods. Did you know that?
I did not.
Yeah, I'm originally from Salisbury, Maryland.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would have pegged you for a native.
Yeah, I know. A lot of people do.
And Danjo will also be playing at the Lebanon Fair on Saturday, July 20th. So those gigs have been very exciting just because they're fun. They're fun. And like Dan coming from this Grateful Dead perspective will like often like move us into another song or hears things within songs, and he's constantly throwing out quotes and reacting to what's going on, which is really thrilling in the moment. That's what I find most exciting about music. Like all other art forms, or most other art forms, are sort of static in nature. Like a painting is there. Not much changing it. Not much changing. Or a book, you like walk around in the mind of the author. But with music,
not much changing it.
With improvisation, you sort of walk hand in hand with the artist. And when the artist discovers something new, you're sort of there for that moment of discovery, which is exciting. But, you know, we also have some gigs with the High Times Band this month. As I mentioned, later on this month, we're doing the Longs Park concert series on the 28th, and we're going to be back with the full band down in Rehoboth at Dogfish Head Brewery in October. So that's going to be exciting. And it's neat because the nice thing I like about playing with Dan, excuse me, getting over a bit of a cold, is that he tries to encourage us to play Grateful Dead covers that aren't played by most Grateful Dead cover bands. Like this past...
I appreciate that.
We did like Here Comes Sunshine, Stella Blue. We're working up some surprises for the Longs Park gig. I hope these come to fruition because they are a bit challenging to get together and debut them for the first time. But we have some really neat plans with that where we plan to sort of exploit our familiarity with ourselves, with our playing styles, and also explore some of the music that we love that, you know, you don't really hear that much.
Right. Well, hey, let's get into Too Little Too Late. What is that about?
Too Little Too Late. You know, oddly enough, if you listen to my music, I seem to write a lot about regret. That seems to be a theme. So I've just recently recognized that, which might have been painfully apparent to anyone who's listened to my music. But yeah, Too Little Too Late is about recognizing that you screwed up and it's too late to fix it. But it was a fun song to write. It's not that I planned to write a song about regret.
It just happens.
It actually started with the chord progression itself and the chord rhythm, which is something I've been toying with for many years. And actually, you may hear the rhythm in some of the covers that I do. I do a cover of a Chuck Berry song called Come On, and I play it my own way, and it has this sort of rhythm just appeals to me. And I think this is sort of a product of my physiology and my surroundings, that this is what feels good to me. And also the way I play Big Boss Man is very different than the other versions of it. It sort of has this lilt to it. And so this rhythm just sort of appealed to me. And, you know, I got together, it was one of the ideas I presented to Bret, and he's like, hey, this one, we should start messing around with this. And it was really interesting because Bret's one of my favorite songwriters. I mean, he's written songs that have charted in Billboard and has done work for the Olympics, and, you know, just has an incredible body of work over his career, and, you know, was really a student of songcraft. And, you know, I could spend hours just talking to him about songwriting and playing. And generally, you know, our sessions, the first hour of a recording session, no recording gets done. No playing gets done. No setup gets done. It's generally talking about music, talking about gigs, talking about players, talking about, you know, songs. And I found that hour to be the best hour spent because it gets us in the mind frame. You know, we have the proper perspective. So when we're ready to get to it, it's like, yeah. You know,
it's not a cold start.
It's not a cold start. We're all warmed up. We're into it. We're loose. We've had some laughs. So it's pretty cool. So when we started to get down to nuts and bolts on this one, and actually, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned to you earlier, this is the one song it took us 2 sessions to put together, which is surprising because it's a simple song. But when I presented to him, he said, you know, this song, economy of lyrics is going to be essential for its success. So when writing this song, we tried to say as much as possible with as little as possible.
Concisely, yeah.
So we wanted to have just very short phrases, very punchy, you know, rhythm on the melody. And I think we achieved it. We wrote the first verse in the first session, and I was in northeastern Pennsylvania visiting my parents, and Bret had his studio there at the time. So on a lark, I was feeling inspired before I returned to Lancaster. I reached out and I said, "Hey, do you have some time today? Could I book some time and we'll see if we could wrap this song up?" And we did the demo for it too. And some interesting things too. Like I love working with Bret because he comes up with some great ideas just because of his experience and his knowledge of the craft. And in addition to his suggestion about keeping things sparse, which I thought was excellent, as we were developing it, he looks at me, he says, "The song could use a jam." And if you know the Badlees music, they're not jammers. They're not extended improvisation band. And that's definitely where I come from. So I don't think anyone will believe me that that's Bret's idea. Everybody's going to say, "No, this is Joe."
Right.
But it was. And also he suggested the key change for it. And, ultimately, I think it has a funkiness that I think Jon Ventre brings to the table. And, AJ Jump is being a master of many different drumming styles. And like the New Orleans stuff is in his wheelhouse. He plays with bands that focuses on uptown rhythms and second line rhythms. So, when I was living in New Orleans, I was a hardcore Meters fan. Every time they played in the city, I'd try to be there as a hardcore Neville's fan. I was soaking in the uptown funk scene, and I was very interested in funk music. I was listening to a lot of Parliament Funkadelic, and Isley Brothers, and stuff in that vein. So to bring a song like this to fruition was a lot of fun. And one thing that was sort of strange, when we were laying down the basic tracks, the bass and drums, I had a dummy guitar track, but it was a little bit more distorted. It was a little sort of heavier. And ultimately, when we were redoing the guitars, we thought, how would clean guitars? And I used a Fender Tele Deluxe guitar. And I don't know if you're familiar with these, but Fender put them out in the 70s, and they have humbucking pickups on it.
Right,
but
yeah.
they're not like Gibson PAFs. They have a different output. So it's a great guitar, has an incredible tone. It's definitely unique. So it's not like a Gibson guitar, and it's not like a Fender guitar, but it feels really great. So I think this guitar definitely helped capture the awesome tone that we got. And I use my 65 Deluxe reissue for the track too, and it's pretty unadorned. I don't think there are any effects on it, and typically I don't use a lot of effects, but depends on the situation.
Right.
I actually have my first effects board, and we could talk about that later, and I haven't had one since the early 90s.
Well, hey, let's take a listen to Too Little Too Late. This is the premiere, so be sure to enjoy it.
Change, things gonna change. Change for worse or better. Fine, yes, I'll be fine. Getting ready for stormy weather. My last mistake. Too little, too late. I wish you stayed. Sign after sign, telling me to change direction. Gone, now you're gone, leaving me to learn the lesson. last mistake. Too little, too late. I wish you stayed.
And that was Too Little Too Late by Joe Cigan, which you can find that on all streaming platforms. This not coming Friday, but next Friday after, July 19th.
Yes, Friday, July 19th, but you heard it here first.
This
This was the first public, I guess.
Showing.
Yeah, showing of it.
Yeah.
So
It's a
thank
good
you for
song.
that.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
hey.
thanks, man.
No, thank you for reaching out to me. Or
Actually, I saw you posting about your newsletter, who has new music, and I said, I do. I got new music.
Yep.
So yeah, it was a delight. It was a great session, funky song, came together quick. It's great when you have a fun track. I love the fact that there's a jam in there. I get to play an extended guitar solo. Like on all my original stuff, I play all the guitars. I don't think I've ever had anyone play guitar on my material, but you know, when you're self-publishing,
That's what you gotta do, yeah.
yeah, you gotta. It's my opportunity to get my stuff out there.
So, talk to me about your pedal board. Are you excited for that?
I am. You know, when in the 80s and early 90s, I played in a Grateful Dead cover band, and I used a lot of effects as the Grateful Dead did at the time. But when I moved to New Orleans, I got away from that. I used to follow a lot of artists that would just have a tube amp and a guitar, and that was definitely what I was interested in doing, and I've done that for years. Never really used guitar effects. But I put a pedal board together, last year sometime, and I put it together myself, daisy chained everything. My buddy Dan gave me a couple pedals he wasn't using, and it was, you know, a bit of a mess because, you know, I bought a pre-cut daisy chain, so all the pedals were akimbo to make sure everything sort of fit and whatnot. And I also set it up. What got me interested in that, a couple years ago, I started using a styrene iridium pedal, which simulates an amplifier, because when I was playing with the Benders, it was a guitar, bass, harmonica combo, we would play a lot of restaurants, and there was a dinner crowd. So we had to play at a volume that did not impede conversation.
Right.
And we played a lot of like groovy, we did some jazz stuff, like Mercy, 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 instrumentals, Chitlin's Concarney and whatnot. So it was sort of low key. And I found that if I used amp simulators, like the Iridium, and I also had a Sans amp for the bass, we could keep the volume low, but still have great tone and clarity and hear ourselves well. And if we could hear ourselves well, it improves dynamics. You have better dynamics. The music's more compelling. So that seemed to work out very well. And I started doing some research and picked up a Quilter Superblock, which was an amp simulator that has a DI. So I'd be able to DI right into my mixer. So I sold the Iridium, And that's why I put the pedal board together. And I know my buddy Dan Jamison, he has his own music company. He does a lot of music repairs and reconditions speakers, and does a lot of work on guitars and setups and wiring and whatnot. And he also makes custom length cables. In fact, the type of cables that I use are custom cut by Dan. They're high transmission wire, the same thing that the Grateful Dead used at the time. And I know he's been catering to a lot of Grateful Dead tribute acts in putting together Obel cables, which are the two cables to handle like Jerry Garcia's wiring, where on Jerry's guitars, the signal from the guitar would leave the guitar, go into the effects pedals, come back into the guitar, so you're controlling the volume on board post effects. So if you're increasing the volume on the guitar, you accretate the input to a pedal, it affects the tone. In this case, so if you increase the volume, you're not changing the tone. And also too, in Jerry's later days, his last guitar, he used Rosebud, which had a Witch Doctor on the plate. That had a MIDI pickup too. So it was the two cables for Obel and a MIDI pickup. And I know Dan's been wiring his own MIDI cables and selling those three together. So I thought, hey, I should give my pedal board to Dan. He could cut custom length pedals and it won't look all sort of strange.
Yeah.
So
it'll be cohesive.
And the great thing about it, he made some additional improvements in that he installed a dedicated power source to it.
That's nice.
And one of the devices he sells on his website is a looper for a pedal board, where it's a box with a series of buttons and indicators on it, where each pedal is set up on a distinct loop. So if that pedal's not on, the signal doesn't go through it.
Oh.
So you get no degradation.
Yeah,
so it's
yeah.
true bypass.
Okay.
So like when I have all my pedals off, I don't have all that extra length in my signal chain.
Right.
It was worth it. Yeah, he hand wires these, and he sold quite a few of them. And I love. I mean, his company's Dan Jam LLC. If you ever want to hit him up, and everyone that I've sent his way for work's been happy with it. But you know, it's been nice to have this setup. Because I don't have to necessarily bring an amplifier with me, and I have some additional tonal selection. I don't use a lot of effects. It's just like a phaser, a vibe.
Right.
3 types of distortion, a distortion, a fuzz, and an overdrive. Just add color in different contexts. But still, like this past Thursday when I was playing at McCleary's, I didn't use any effects. I just brought a small amplifier, which is fun too when you want to get like sort of an authentic tone.
Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on the show. I got one more question, and then we'll kind of wrap it all up. What techniques, as a songwriter, as a guitarist, are you still looking to master?
I think I want to master. I hope I describe this well, but being able to work on my voice leading better. So as the harmony changes, I'm able to add dissonance to create tension, and also to resolve it on strong chord tones, and also not necessarily end up on the root. And you know how I've been trying to bring that to fruition? When I lived in New Orleans, I was fascinated by brass bands. And I used to go see the Rebirth Brass Band every Tuesday at the Maple Leaf. And I was always fascinated with, excuse me, the way brass bands would improvise. Because I always found it to be very compelling, and you could attach to it. So on the days where I focus on improving my improvisational skills when practicing, I will practice along with brass bands. And I will try to identify rhythmic figures, stop the recording, and try to develop that. And I found that to be very helpful in focusing on presenting phrases. You know, a lot of the music that I've listened to in the past, I like jazz. I listen to a lot of Coltrane. I listen to a lot of jazz players that put long lines together. And if you heard me play, I'm a little on the notey side.
Right.
So how I want to improve, I want to play fewer notes. I want to have stronger phrases.
Where can people find you at?
Well, you could find me on Apple Music and Amazon Music and YouTube and
your
all
website.
digital outlets, and my website, which probably does need some updating. I won't deny it. But this month, next Friday, I'll be at Tellus 360 from 7 to 9 doing a solo show. As I mentioned, I'll be down in Rehoboth Beach at the end of the month with Dan for a Dan Joe show at Dogfish Head Brewing. We'll be also out at the Lebanon Fair, I believe, the week before. And then we'll be in Longs Park on Sunday, July 28th with two other wonderful bands, hoping for good weather and a lovely evening.
Absolutely. With all that said, please be sure to check out Joe Cigan at CIGAN.com, Joe Cigan. My name is Corey Rose, and this has been the Story Podcast. You can check out all the things that I do over at CoreyRosenProductions.com. That's CORYROSEN Productions.com. We've got a lot of events coming up, including tomorrow. We have a short cinema showcase. This is where we bring in, it's like an open mic for short films in the local area. So a lot of college students, we even had some people from New Jersey and Maryland last time show up and show off their short films. And since it's a free event, you guys are welcome to come out here at the Susquehanna River Creative Conspiracy. We also have our open mics every Wednesday from 7 to 11. I host those as well. And we've got a lot of stuff coming out. Stuff I gotta tell you about. I got a movie coming out in theaters. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, that I worked on the music for.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I remember you talking about working on music for a soundtrack.
Yeah, that's the one. And
Awesome.
Hopefully it should be coming out within the next few months. More updates will be on the website. With all that said, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you guys later. Bye.